Hey, so I want to talk about a book I just read. I finished this book last night, and it was amazing. But the story begins a long time ago. I was driving to work one day in 2015, 5 years ago, and I was listening to NPR as I often do. And there was an interview with an author who had an upcoming book, and it was her first book coming out. And her name was Saba Tahir, and she was talking about her childhood growing up. Her family owned a motel someplace in the desert of California. I hope I'm remembering that correctly. And she talked about how, because she was kind of alone, maybe more than most kids, she took solace in stories, in comic books, in music, and how a lot of that kind of stayed with her. And it was just so interesting listening to this interview. I'd never heard of her before, had never heard of her book before, An Ember in the Ashes. And so when I got to work, turned off my car, first thing I did was go to Amazon and I pre-ordered the book that was coming out the next week. I didn't have a ton of expectations, but it arrived, and oh my God, it was so good. And so An Ember in the Ashes, this is the newer version of it. And I absolutely loved that book. And so then the next book came out, A Torch Against the Night, a little bit later. Reaper at the Gates. I don't have that book right now. It's in my classroom. And this December, I think, the fourth book, the final book in the series, A Sky Beyond the Storm, came out. And it's hard to talk about just one of these books, because like any good series, it's a collection. It's one story, one long, beautiful story with so many things interwoven, so many characters that stick with me. And what I love about, there's a lot of things I love about this series. One is that it's the An Ember in the Ashes is the book. When I hear a kid in my class loves to read, this is the book that I put in his or her hands, always. And I say, you've got to read this book, especially if it's a student of color. I want them to be reading a book like this, written by a female author of color, with characters that are diverse, issues that are diverse, that are about the issues that we deal with, without really being blatantly, overtly about that. But things like equality are represented in these stories. And what's been great is, what I remember is, this was 5 years ago when Ember first came out. And when this book was released, Sky Beyond the Storm, when it came out in December, I had lots of former students reach out to me, send me an email, say, hey, did you hear? This book is coming out. People sent me pictures with the book in their hand, like, I finally got it, Mr. Waddles. And that tells me everything. That this is a series that sticks with kids. Here's why it's going to stick with you. I've always believed the reason that I became an English major, the reason that I became an English teacher, is because of stories. And I have always felt this, that our mind is, our brain is hardwired for storytelling. And this book, this series, that's what it's about. There are all the things that we always see, characters dealing with obstacles and overcoming things. And Leia of Sarah is a character that everyone should get to know. What I love the most about this series is that, for me, it celebrated the power of story. Not just because you're reading a story, right? But the idea that stories are everywhere, and that there are characters who are using the power of story to overcome the obstacles that are in front of them. That's what spoke to me. Yes, it's just a great story. It's exciting. When I read, like the last 100 pages of this book, Sky Beyond the Storm, I read turning each page, not, I couldn't wait to see what was going to happen next, but I got a little bit sad with each turn of the page, knowing that there was that much less of the story for me to read. But this series is one that will stick with me. This is a series that I will continue to put in students' hands as long as I'm teaching. An Ember in the Ashes. This series is changing people's lives. One of my students wrote about it in her college essay. So if I could recommend one book for you, if you haven't yet read it, An Ember in the Ashes. If you've heard me make that recommendation and you followed it, then you need to read the last book in the series right here, A Sky Beyond the Storm. Sabatir. Thanks very much.